All
We're
right.
on.
Welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. Ever find yourself wondering about the world's biggest topics? Join your host, Mike Haltman, CEO, board chair, and all around deep thinker, as he dives into real estate, investing, national security, self improvement, dating, networking, finance, and so much more. Expert guests, real conversations, no limits. Hit subscribe and get ready for insights, surprises, and conversations that will make you think. The Do You Ever Wonder podcast starts now.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Haltman. And as the intro said, if you're looking for conversations that are going to make you think, today I think could be a great example of that. So today's guest is Adam Swart, and he is the CEO of Crowds on Demand. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Mike, great to be with you.
Well, you know what? I saw you interviewed on TV, and I reached out because I find what you do fascinating. I think, for most of us, when we look at a demonstration or we look at or an organized crowd, we think it's mostly organic, but apparently that's not always the case. And you are the consummate guest to ask that question. So you provide crowds, you provide people to attend, and how did you come up with that idea?
Sure. Well, it's funny the concept of organic versus non-organic. I mean, it's all sort of a spectrum. We'll get into that in the my theory on this whole concept because there is no such thing as a truly organic protest. Everyone has a reason to be there, whether they're paid, whether they're a staffer, whether they're flexing on Instagram, whether they're trying to impress a girl, right? Like, there's always some reason other than like your pure belief for a in a cause, right, that gets you out there. So that's fine. I started this company about 13 years ago at this point. I was still in college at UCLA and working on a lot of Democratic campaigns. I always like to stress I'm an independent now. We work with right and
Good
left.
for you.
Um, so I don't owe any party my support or loyalty. That's not my style. So basically, worked on a lot of Democratic campaigns. And at the time, a lot of the guys who ran those Democratic campaigns came of age. They were college students in the 60s, right? Era of immense activism. You could get 5,000 people in the quad if you had flyers, right?
Mhm.
And they were struggling to draw turnout in a new era, right? And they would always tell me, Adam, get me a few thousand students to attend this rally. And I'm like, guys, this is actually quite challenging, right? There aren't a lot of people who can draw those type of crowds for a political event. So, but when we were able to draw crowds, you really noticed the change in context. And I always like to say that imagine the great speeches of all time delivered in front of a crowd of three, right? Imagine Martin Luther King saying, I have a dream in front of two people,
Right,
right? I mean, it's a
right.
beautiful words, but it wouldn't have had the same resonance as if it was a million people, on the mall of the Capitol, right? So the concept there is clear, and it actually is even more so when it comes to protests. You can actually make a huge impact with even just a small number of enthusiastic protesters. You have one candidate hosting a rally with 1,000 people. Could put 20 people outside. That's 2%, right? And get almost equal airtime with that candidate if you play your cards right, and if the
Right.
media kind of takes your point of view, right? So I saw there's this huge benefit, and to really get into it, in LA, one thing I noticed is you had a ton of out of work actors. So I got to thinking, hey, what if instead of working as a waiter or a valet, you could be a protester, you could be an audience member, you could participate in like PR stunts for companies, right? So I can get into a little bit later how we now make sure that people do care about the issue at hand in our protests. So we don't, at the time we started, it didn't really matter. We would just sort of, so if you had a pulse, we would turn you out, right?
Well,
But
quick question. So you said that, you could have 2,000 people inside, 20 outside, and
yeah,
you could get as much media attention if the 20 outside played their cards right.
That's right.
What is the hand that they need to play in order to get that same attention?
Well, you gotta have catchy signs. You gotta be something with the zeitgeist, and you gotta target the media that is looking to cover that candidate with the 2,000 people negatively, right? Because so you've got to find what are those issues that the media is going to want to pick apart, right? So that is going to obviously change depending on the candidate. And so you have to play your cards right because obviously it's hard for 20 people to get the same coverage as 2,000. But if you really have a insight and can stress, let's just say you have a candidate who has a Me Too scandal, right? Like a sexual harassment matter, and then you have domestic violence survivors outside, right? That's one example of where you could probably get equal time as the person inside.
On that issue, yes, but take so I know you're an independent now, but if you
Yeah.
had to measure the percentage of organizations or the organizing that you do or the crowds that you provide, left versus right, what would you say is like for instance, you said that it's hard to coalesce and attract a large crowd.
Yes.
Now, when Trump has a rally, I'm guessing that a lot of those people are not paid, if any.
Well, well, first of all, so to let's actually talk about that for a second. So I think part of what makes a good for a large attendance is to make your rallies sort of like county fairs, right? Like you've been to Trump rallies, I've been to Trump rallies, right? They're kind of like county fairs. So yes, I'm not saying that the people are there because they're paid and they don't support Trump. I'm saying that people are there to meet like-minded people. They're there to network. They're there to be on Instagram. They're there. It's like a county
Right.
fair.
Uh, And
So so
just for full disclosure, because full disclosure, you're an independent. I have
yeah,
never been to a Trump rally. Full disclosure, was never really a Trump supporter. I am a
sure.
Republican, but I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, fair, fair. I mean, I think everyone should go to a Trump rally regardless of your political affiliation because I think if you don't understand the people who support him, just like if you don't understand the people on the other side, then it's hard to really get a pulse on the country. So I highly recommend people to actually go out there regardless of if you support him, and maybe it'll make you support him or maybe it'll make you be like, no, I don't want to support him. So um for me, I have to study these things for my own business. So of
Right.
course I'm going to go
So
to these.
how many of the rallies or things that you organize and supply people for, how many of those do you actually attend?
Oh no, not many, not many.
Like on any given
For the
day,
most part, I don't go to most of our events.
so on any given day, how many events might you be supplying people for?
We may have three or four a day, maybe
Really?
more sometimes. Maybe less. Some days less. Some days less. Like holidays tends to be less.
Right.
For example, and around major events tends to be more. But keep in mind that we might have, let's just say, 30 people in Cleveland for something, might be 100 people in New York for something, and we might have five people outside that are in LA that have been there for 6 months at this point, right? So we have what
Really?
different types of engagements. So one of the type of engagements that I love to do is what's called picketing, where you have people outside for every single day, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, holding signs, passing out flyers, right? So it's a great use of our kind of thing because most people are not going to be able to otherwise go if they're not compensated because they have jobs, they have responsibilities.
Right.
So especially if you want that sustained presence, it really helps to use our services.
Absolutely. So let's say I'm doing some kind of a presentation and
Mhm.
I want to enhance my crowd. What's
Yeah.
the execution? I call you, I
Mhm.
explain it to you. How does that exactly work from me needing people to you supplying people?
Yeah, so you call us, right? You obviously we delve into what type of people that do you want out there? Is it a political event or is it more of a business launch, right? If it's a business launch, what are your target customers, right? So who do you want in that crowd? So then assuming it's kind of your average sort of diverse crowd, we source that, right? Or sometimes you might say, hey, actually, my audience is women 30 to 50. Well, okay, we'll source that for you if that's sort of the general crowd that you're looking for. So
And
whatever.
is that all actors who are out of, like,
Well, it's
what's this? You have a portfolio of people you could call.
that's correct.
How many are actors? How many are actually activists?
It's a mix of both, and it also depends on what specific engagement is, right? So if this is a product launch, of course we would bring actors there, right?
Right.
Because we need is people who are enthusiastic, who can essentially, it's like central casting. That's what we are, right? We basically say, hey, this is the kind of person that you are looking for at your event, and that therefore we will source that person, those type of people. And if you need questions to be asked, we can kind of have people ask the right questions, right, et cetera, et cetera. For political events, it's a little bit harder because we want to make sure that people really care about the event, about the cause. So in some cases, of course, we have a network, but in some cases, if we don't have people that correctly fit, we also have ways of reaching out to certain types of people. So let's just say I'm in rural Mississippi and we need an environmentalist rally because they're going to build some sort of power plant that's going to be really bad for that region, right? Well, I don't know offhand whether we have good environmentalist activists in rural Mississippi. Maybe we don't. So maybe we contact different people within the group and let them know, hey, we'd love for them to come out, and obviously on a compensated basis. So,
So now,
but
are they, do you ask them to also bring in additional people?
sure, but we typically compensate everyone who attends the event. And the reason why we do that is because it's a guarantee of attendance, right? So
Right.
when we find that it's so funny, there are times where customers have asked us to organize events and not compensate attendees, and you end up spending a lot more money with a lot less certainty of who's going to show up. I would
Right.
rather have the certainty of who's going to show up and make sure that these are brand ambassadors for your cause. That's the other thing, or your company, right? Because if you have ordinary randos show up, they could say offensive things.
Oh,
They
yeah.
could do offensive things, right?
Absolutely.
They might be ill-informed about the issue, right? So when you have people who are paid, are compensated, they're passionate about the subject, but they're compensated, right? It's very clear that they want to get the paycheck at the end of the engagement, which
Right.
means they're not going to just go off and do some crazy stuff. So you're able to actually put together a far more articulate, controlled rally, right? Like imagine the if you were trying to hire a lawyer and you didn't pay the lawyer, right? If you're a conservative, you might want to hire a conservative attorney to represent you, but that attorney is still going to expect a paycheck, right?
Right.
And vice versa.
So now how do you vet, or do you vet? Like, if someone is, say, you contact me, you know me for the in the environmental rally, and I say I got five people who I can bring in. How do you know what the content of their heart to quote
Well,
Martin Luther
I
King again?
suppose, Mike, you have to consider your point was okay, if someone's not compensated, should it be assumed that they're that they believe it? I think we can take people's word for it. The way that I look at it is I will take your word if you say that you believe in the cause, right? Because the amount of money that we pay people, it's in the hundreds of dollars, depending, maybe low hundreds, maybe high hundreds, depending on the specific nature of the engagement. If you're standing out in like the freezing cold for 12 hours, you're gonna get paid like more than if you're sitting in an audience in, New York City in a theater for an hour, right? That makes sense. But the point being that it's kind of a little bit condescending and classist what some talk show hosts are saying, oh, well, these people don't care because they're paid a couple $100 when they themselves say, oh, well, I'm genuine about my beliefs, even though I get paid a million, $10 million, right?
100%. A hundred
So
percent.
I think that the idea, I think that you're selling the American people short if you think that they would betray their convictions for a couple
No,
$100.
no, no. I have no doubt that the people who come are definitely likely passionate about what they do. But, my question in terms of vetting is, how do you know that someone's not going to do something stupid,
Well, we
violent or stupid?
well, look, I mean, you can never, I mean, if Starbucks hires someone to make coffee, right? How does Starbucks know that that person isn't going to throw scalding coffee in a customer's face, right? Like,
You hope
yeah,
and
you
pray. Right.
I mean, it's very unlikely. I've been to Starbucks many times. That's never happened. I mean, so it's kind of a hypothetical. What I will say to answer the question though is that we've been in business 13 years and we've never had an incident.
No kidding.
So, and we've done, I don't even know how many thousands of events. So in 13 years, and we've never had an incident.
That's
Um,
amazing.
the only times that we've had problems is sometimes when you have an external groups that are trying to antagonize, right? And there, what you have to do is sometimes you have to hire security, and sometimes you have to be conscious about the engagements that you take. But our people are people who are, I like to say, represent the silent majority in many cases because there's so many 80-20 issues where the 20 percent always get what they want. And we often are hired to represent the 80% who don't show up to every city council meeting.
So let me ask you this, and only because it's all over the news,
Sure.
whether it's what's going on in Chicago, whether it's what's going on in Portland, whether the October 7th rallies yesterday, you have a platform of nonviolence,
Oh, 100%.
but at the same time, do you supply people in a nonviolent context to go to those rallies, or do they
Well,
not need your help?
well, I think everyone needs my help to tell you the truth because and I'll tell you why in a second.
Sure.
But the challenge is that we have to show discretion in these sorts of things. Like I'll give you a hypothetical example. If you're Antifa versus Proud Boys kind of context, right? I don't want you. Well, first of all, I don't necessarily
I can
associate
only, you know
myself with.
what? You're painting a picture of something that would be one shit show.
Well, it would, and it's happened though. It happens all the time in
Is that right?
Portland, Seattle. Yeah, well, because one brings out the other. That's the thing. So if one shows up, the other shows up. Do you
Okay.
see what I'm saying? Particularly in regions that have a lot of both, right? So LA doesn't necessarily have a huge Proud Boys contingent, but if you look at like Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, like the cities are very Antifa, and then the rural areas surrounding have more Proud Boys. So when one comes, the other comes.
So
I'll
you
tell
try
you.
and stay away from that
So
kind of
like I'm saying, that's an
inter-politics.
example of I don't associate myself with either of their views, and
Right.
we would try look to stay away. And even if I did support one of their views, I would still say stay away because of the fact that that is just a situation that is a powder keg, right?
No question.
Now, when it comes to some of this, the national issues, what I like to do is I'm in the business of persuasion. So what I like to do is persuade people and take on causes that have a little nuance and where we're not just kind of in the noise bubble, right? So if you mentioned Israel Palestine, right? My challenge with those type of things is I like to take a nuanced position, which is my personal view on that subject, and neither side wants to do it. So I keep selling people unsuccessfully on both sides of like, hey, I would do a rally that to free the hostages. I would do a rally to stop the bombing in Gaza. But no, they don't want to do it. No one wants to do an 80% rally. I
So
want
the
to do something that is persuasive. Most people agree bombing should stop, right? Most people agree hostages should be freed no matter what, right? But they don't want to do it, right? The Israel side wants to say, okay, if you say anything that we don't like, you're an anti-Semite. And the Palestinian side wants to say river to the sea, and host pictures of the Ayatollah, right? Khomeini, right? So my thing is like there's a noise bubble, and what's really interesting is neither side is convincing anybody, right? I think the only reason that we're going toward the Palestine, that the nation is moving more on the Palestine side, is because more people on the right have kind of soured on Israel. But I like to take on nuanced movements. So where you're advocating something a little different from other people.
Okay.
So that is my general, or if we are taking on a quote unquote mainstream cause, then what I'd want to do is advocate it in a way that's more persuasion focused, right? And the reality is a lot of this stuff is missing on both right and left, or Israel Palestine, which doesn't even conform to those dimensions.
So if you had to, in terms of the calls you get for crowds, in terms of Republican versus Democrat, right versus left, would you say that the majority or more than 50% are on the left?
That really depends on the location and the cause. So we tend to be an
Good point.
oppositional. So I'll put it this way: we tend to be an oppositional force. So in California, we tend to be more used by conservatives, right? Because California, and particularly the cities, are dominated by the left, right?
Right.
So the conservatives need to be the opposition, right? Because hiring crowd is by its nature sort of an oppositional strategy, right? It tends to not be an incumbency strategy, right? So we tend to be hired by startups, not Google. We tend to be
Right.
hired by the opposition party, not the party in power, right? So that is different. So, for example, we were proud to work with conservatives there. We've been proud to work in various places against the, defund the police, idiocy, right, on behalf of conservatives, right? But we're also happy to work for healthcare, right? Like I don't think anyone should die due to lack of access to healthcare. And if that's it shouldn't be, I think conservatives are boneheaded for not giving people healthcare, but we will work for healthcare, right? So I like to take on common sense causes that kind of make sense to people that so I'll put it that way. But we've worked with left and right, and I'm
Right.
happy to continue to do so on areas of common sense.
Now, the majority of people who hire you, are they typically looking to remain, I'm sure, I guess they would be looking to remain anonymous for the most part.
Yeah, so I'll tell you why. So a couple of reasons. Number one, basically there's cancel culture, right? So they've been, I mean, for years we've had left-wing cancel culture. Now we're seeing right-wing cancel culture. The concept of cancel culture, I feel like I have to define it, is basically you said or did something that hurts my feelings, so we want to destroy you, basically, right? That's
We
what
want to
cancel
destroy you.
culture.
Right. Right.
Right. And basically a lot of people want to fund causes that may not be popular with their board or their employer, right? So we do work with liberals in that situation now, but we've worked with many conservatives, particularly in the Biden administration during the ESG environmental social governance era, where a lot of corporate CEOs and board members wanted to fund conservative causes, but they were like, hey, if we got to do this from arm's length because essentially they're going to cancel me and take away
Interesting.
my livelihood if
Very interesting. Yeah.
and by the way, the Supreme Court has regularly honored the principle of anonymous free speech being free speech. So that people actually have the ability to do it. Now, of course, if this is all we're in the context of stuff that's legal advocacy, right? You don't have the right to fund illegal activity
Of
anonymous.
course. Of course. So now,
Um,
when you look at some of these protests, and this is always a big talking point, supposedly organic protests, they have the best equipment, they have uniform signs, everything is
sure.
is great. So those are funded protests, I would imagine, but not through you.
Well, every protest is a funded protest. It just depends on exactly the mechanism and exactly how funded it is. So some protests are more funded, and some protests are less funded. But every protest is funded, right? Because in order to get a permit, in order to have attorneys around it, in order to have signs, banners, flyers, right? Organization, someone has to put it together and email a ton of people, right? There's money involved, right? Yes, if you're referring to, okay, the tent encampments, which we were not part of because they were illegal, right? Where all the tents were the same, right? It appeared. It looked like someone went to REI and bought like 100 tents,
Right.
right? But those were actually illegal encampments, right? You're not
Correct.
technically allowed to set up encampments on the uh, campus of a private university.
Correct.
So we didn't take part of that in that, but obviously there's money behind it,
Right.
behind that, right? Or if we go to something that's even more shady, right? There was tactical gear being distributed on the streets of Los Angeles, right? And we don't know who is funding it. We're trying to get to the bottom of it, but someone was funding it because that is very expensive.
And you had people there
Uh, I had people where?
in LA.
In those protests, no, we
No.
no, that was too tense. So like to be clear, we don't like to get involved in these sort of, I mean, first of all, I think you completely should and do have a constitutional right to protest ICE outside their facilities,
Of course.
protest for due process. But however, the protest, just to be clear, for your audience, what we're talking about the protest that took place over this summer, where they were actually blocking ICE facilities. So they were
Right.
blocking the vehicles, which kind of poses a safety risk both to the protesters, but also to the agents, but also to the migrants who are being deported, right? Everyone's at risk,
Absolutely.
right? So I don't endorse or associate myself with those
Uh,
with that. But I also think that there has not been nearly enough effort. Trump promised to be the most free speech president in history, and I think we can all kind of agree that that isn't really true.
Well, I'll go along with that. I will agree with that. So, have you ever had to bail out any of your protesters who unfortunately got caught up in a bad
Oh,
situation?
no, and I'll tell you why, because like I said, 13 years of operation, because we're judicious about what causes we take on. So I say no to big money all the time because I'm like, that's going to be too dangerous. That's not going to be effective, right? So I say no way more than I say yes. I'm like the hot girl at the
That's great.
bar, you know. I say no like more than I say yes.
Okay.
Uh,
And so people, and I know everyone's anonymous who does hire you. You always hear the name George Soros thrown around,
huh,
but
sure.
you've heard that name,
I've heard him a couple times. Yeah, just
I'm
just in
sure.
passing and just in
Yeah, yeah,
passing.
yeah, yeah.
What
But
does he do? But yeah, so you're gonna ask me, has he hired us? Okay, I'll tell
no, no,
you.
no, you can't tell me that.
Well, let me actually answer this question because it's probably the most frequent question I ever get asked by like anybody.
Okay.
So here's the deal with Soros and any like person of that level, right? The Kochs, right? Like that level of donor, right? Is these people have networks and you could actually be working for them without even knowing it. Because they have layers upon layers upon layers of networks. I mean, Soros, he has open societies. They donate to so many different groups who fund so many different groups who do so many different things. So to actually say anyone who says they've not worked with George Soros
No idea.
has no idea. And I think he's funding conservative causes too, because I think the theory, and I just want to be clear because I don't want to get a cease
Sure.
and desist from
Yeah,
his
yeah.
lawyer. I want to be clear that my theory about Soros is that it has nothing to do with liberals, right? It has everything to do with potentially, if you look at his history as a finance guru, right? He made money off the collapse of the British currency. So
He
this is the
he
man,
contributed greatly to that collapse.
so he makes money when there's societal collapse.
Hmm.
So I'm just saying, if there was one person you could imagine would be funding both sides to try to polarize the country to cause societal collapse. I mean, again, I can't
That's
prove it. I don't know. I'm just saying,
That's
like,
interesting.
like if if the goal was to have societal collapse so you could make money, which I mean, it's odd because your money wouldn't have much good in a collapsed society.
True.
But would you not fund both far right and far left, try to create as much division as possible, and then for in the hopes that there's some sort of collapse that then can be capitalized upon?
He may be long a shit ton of gold.
Yeah, so my point is, I think that if you're trying to think of a political motive for him, like I don't necessarily buy it. I think
Right.
there could be a financial motive for him.
That's very interesting. You know what? I never really thought about it in that context, but you very well may be right. So, where do you go from here? Do you have any plans to expand? Do you
Sure.
plan on using AI in any way?
I don't know enough about how to use AI yet. Um, I think that in this digital era, it's actually almost more important to have people in person because people are starting to tune out digitally because we're just getting ads from our computers, ads from our phones, from our TVs, from everything, from probably a hologram soon, and actually seeing real people advocating for real things, talking person to person, like Charlie Kirk. So eloquently and effectively did, whether you agree with him or not, there's a real beauty in that,
Uh,
right?
no
And
question. So, where do you see your company going?
I want to take on fewer campaigns and bigger ones over the years.
Okay.
Like I would like, instead of taking hundreds and hundreds per year of campaigns and obviously some big ones and a lot of small ones, I would much rather focus on like two or three really big ones. And I'll tell you the ones I want to focus on. I want to take on fast food for poisoning people, particularly working class and people of color, right? I want to just take on this industry and expose them for what they are, right? Killers, murderers, right? Um,
What do
that's
you
what
really
they
think?
are. I mean, more people die due to fast food than any other cause of
Yeah,
death.
no, it couldn't
Um,
be much more unhealthy.
yeah, I mean, and not even just the Big Macs, it's the soda that they, so I'm putting Coca-Cola in with the McDonald's, right? I actually
Absolutely.
think Coca-Cola is worse than McDonald's because the if you have a Big Mac, okay, one Big Mac probably okay, but I know people who drink like Coca-Cola like it's water, and that's actually going to kill you much faster.
A lot of
Um,
obesity.
yeah, obesity, but also the sugar, the thyroidism, hyperthyroidism, all that stuff. These people need to be held accountable like tobacco was. This is as bad for people as the smoking industry, and we need to do to them what was done to the smoking industry. And rein them in. I mean, I'm a American. I believe in freedom. I think people should be able to but poison themselves if they want, but I think people are drinking that stuff and eating that stuff not knowing it's poison.
Hey, I don't disagree. And you know what? You look at the food dyes, you look at all the crap that's been put into our food, and
And by the
that's
way, RFK has been a total paper tiger on this issue. He hasn't done jack squat. Like he's got to do more, but I'd like to pressure him to not be such sorry, I was going to say a vulgar word,
well, you can
but
say it.
I mean, he's kind of a pussy, honestly. Like he's like, which I knew he was gonna be. Like I knew he was gonna like talk his like croaky talk and then ultimately do nothing because the those industries are so powerful. He pretends like he
Absolutely.
cares, but he like, and I'm sure maybe he does, but he hasn't done anything.
Well,
So
his ancestors made a lot of money from the demise of people too.
oh,
So,
they did, yeah, bootleggers, yeah. That's
well,
that's
no,
very.
I was thinking during the stock market crash in '29.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah,
made
yeah.
money on that
The
too.
philan the big money guys, the J.P. Morgans, the Kennedys, they made a lot of money.
I did not even know that. Okay, well,
Yeah,
that's a fun fact to know. Well,
that's
yeah, I mean, I mean that it's a family of rapists and murderers, obviously. But
well, you know what? You have strong opinions. I like it.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, it's and some of them I assume are good people.
I would assume so.
That's a
But
Trump line, um, but the I guess my point is on the so I'd love to take on fast food, and I'd love to take on the idea also for the Black community of actually creating economic wealth and true prosperity in the community. So I'd love to actually create an independent Black advocacy, right? Because I've known many of my friends are in the Black community and kind of have seen what has happened to Black communities, despite, many, many generations and many good faith attempts to help and many bad faith attempts to help. And it's time for, in my opinion, for African Americans and on the left and on rural Americans on the right to realize the Democrats and the Republicans have not served them. And what I'd love for is for rural Americans and Black Americans to become independent voters instead of being Republicans and Democrats,
Listen, man. Amen.
because Republicans have completely shit on rural voters. They don't care. There's fentanyl taking over, there's Oxycontin taking over, and they don't do anything, right? And Black communities have gone to like shit under Democratic administrations. They haven't done anything. So what I would like to see is for both of those people to be like, hey, if you want to vote, you better work for it. It's not free.
That's for 100%.
So
Hopefully,
those are the type of causes that I want to take on. I'll take on plenty of causes in between, but if you're asking me where I ideally would be suited on, I want to take on the parties, industrial complexes, and the fast food, right? Because that's just gonna, I mean, we're gonna be in a better place. And then lastly, what I'd like to do is figure out some way of getting America laid again, because I think you have too many people. You have the people on the two groups, the high school educated or less men who are struggling, and then you've got successful, very well educated women who can't find a man because men generally want to date down and women generally want to date up. So we gotta fix that, because you got one group that's like 100% MSNBC left and another group that's 100% like Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, right? And it's like we got to get them together.
and you have people like us in the middle.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly. We need strong, moderate leaders, right?
I
And the
agree.
problem with moderate leaders is that they are generally like just not, they don't have powerful voices. And
Yep,
I think we need that. Like you can't be a milk toast moderate. You have to be a common sense moderate.
I
So,
agree. So
well, I did
hopefully,
say I have opinions.
yeah, no, you definitely do, and I love it. I love it. So we have to go, but you've been great, and I want to come back and hear more about where we are, and hopefully when we meet next time, things will be a little bit better.
You got it, my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Do You Ever Wonder? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and drop us a review. We'll be back soon with more insights, experts, and conversations that make you think. See you next time. Do you ever wonder where curiosity meets conversation?